I remember the first night I saw it, though I had tried for years to forget the way the forest felt then. The fog hung low over the pines, curling around the trunks like fingers, and the only sound was the soft hum of distant electricity. The air smelled damp, heavy with moss and something metallic I couldn't place. I had come here to escape, to breathe in silence, yet the silence itself felt alive. My lantern flickered as I stepped deeper into the shadows, and for a moment I thought I imagined the shapes moving just beyond the pale light. Then the sky above cracked open, not with thunder, but with something glowing, something slow and deliberate, hovering over the treetops. The hairs on my neck stood on end, and my stomach tightened in a knot I couldn't untangle. I froze, unsure whether to run or stay, as the object above seemed almost to watch me. That's when I saw it, a faint figure reflected in the glass of my lantern, standing among the trees, though I was utterly alone. The road was empty. Fog curled along the edges of the fields. It was late, the kind of late where even the wind seems hesitant. I was walking slowly, the gravel crunching under my shoes when the first light appeared. High above the corn, pale and pulsing. At first I thought it was a plane. The steady pattern, too quiet to be a helicopter. Then a flicker, a pause. It didn't move like anything I knew. A hum drifted through the air. Low, almost gentle, but it vibrated beneath my ribs. I stopped. The wind softened. The world seemed to hold its breath. The lights shifted, not along a path, but darting, folding like they were watching me. And I wasn't sure if I was moving or if they were. I whispered to myself that it could be a drone. But drones don't float in perfect silence. They don't hum in waves that make your teeth tingle. They don't vanish when you take a step closer. I moved forward. The corn rustled at the edges, brushing against itself like fingers across fabric. I could feel eyes. Cold, pale, invisible but aware. The lights split. A dozen points hovering, then merging, shapes twisting faster than logic allowed. It was impossible. And yet I couldn't look away. A static filled the air, rising, like the world itself was tuning to a frequency I shouldn't hear. It seeped into my skin, into my bones. I reached the field's edge. The lights disappeared. Nothing but rustling corn, pale stalks shivering in the fog. I swallowed. A breath caught in my throat. I stepped into the corn. Leaves brushed my arms, wet and whispering. The path I had imagined didn't exist. Every step echoed back at me, hollow. Then I heard it. Soft footsteps behind me, not mine. Light, cautious, deliberate. Matching my pace without sound, without shadow, I stopped. The footsteps stopped. A silence so complete it pressed into my ears. I waited. My heart clamped tight, but I didn't move. The lights returned, briefly high above, darting in impossible angles. Then gone. I turned slowly. The road was still empty. The hum lingered, fading like a dream. But the feeling remained, that I wasn't alone, that I had never been alone. I retraced my steps. The corn whispered secrets I couldn't hear, rustling around me like old voices. The road curved, fog thickening, swallowing familiar markers. Every shadow seemed to stretch. The trees leaned closer. The wind spoke in shallow breaths. Something moved just beyond the corner of my eye. I stopped again. A light glimmered at the far edge of the field. Not the same as before. Smaller, closer, hesitant. I froze. It blinked, then drifted toward me, then veered upward, impossibly fast. Gone. Silence returned. I could hear my own breathing, harsh and uneven. My shoes on gravel. A crow cawed far away. And still, a sense of being observed lingered. I made it home. The door closed softly behind me. The lights were gone. Only the hum in my chest remained, the memory of pale figures dancing just beyond understanding. I haven't walked that road since. Not at night. But sometimes when the fog presses against the window, I swear I see them. Brief flickers, impossibly high, watching, waiting, just beyond the fields. The corn rustles still, though the wind is calm. And sometimes when everything is quiet enough, I hear it. The soft, persistent hum, like something calling me back. I don't go back. Not yet, but I feel it. like a shadow brushing my mind, soft and endless, hovering just where the lights disappeared. The hill smelled of wet grass. A fog hung low, curling around the trees like it had a weight of its own. I could see the old barn before I even reached the slope, its silhouette jagged against the pale light of the moon. The town felt distant here. Even the usual hum of the highway seemed to vanish. Only the soft rustle of my own steps, pressed into the earth, marked my passage. I paused at the base of the hill. The barn's windows were cracked, thin lines of moonlight escaping into the night. Something flickered behind one of them, small, fleeting, like a shadow trying to remember itself. The grass whispered underfoot as I climbed. Each blade pressed damp and cold against my shoes. I tried to tell myself it was an animal, or the wind, but my chest tightened with a strange hesitation. A soft shift behind the barn caught my eye. I froze mid-step. A shape, small, humanoid, peered from the darkness, its head tilted as though curious. I wanted to blink to adjust my eyes, but it was already gone. Only the faintest imprint in the dew remained where it might have stood. The silence pressed in after it vanished. I breathed slowly, trying to pull my thoughts together. The barn's wood groaned, almost sighing under the weight of its own years. I moved closer. The air grew colder, sharper. A moth, or maybe something else, brushed past my face, but there was no sound of wings, only a sensation of passing. Inside, the barn smelled of dry straw and old decay. Pale light flickered through the cracks, making the shadows jitter like nervous insects. Each shadow seemed alive, moving just beyond where my eyes could catch them. I wanted to step back. The ground here was uneven, stones hidden beneath the grass, but I felt drawn to the window where I had seen the small figure. I leaned against the weathered wood. A whisper of movement brushed the corner of my vision. Nothing concrete, just a trembling of air, a shifting in the shadows. The silence stretched. I could hear my own heartbeat, uneven, too loud in the emptiness. The barn seemed to breathe around me, slow and deliberate, like it was studying me as much as I was studying it. I pressed closer to the glass. The reflection showed only myself, pale, small, unsure. But then, for a heartbeat, I thought I saw eyes behind mine watching from the other side. A creak came from above. Not the roof settling, something small, light, moving along the rafters. I couldn't tell what it was, and I didn't want to. A faint scuffing echoed below. It was careful, deliberate. I wanted to call out, but my voice felt trapped in my throat. The wind shifted, and the barn smelled different. A hint of wet earth and something metallic. I blinked, and the smell vanished, leaving only the damp hay and rot. I pressed my hand to the window pane. Cold, solid, but behind it, nothing. No shape, no eyes, no small humanoid figure. Then a shadow stretched across the floor inside. It wasn't attached to anything I could see. It flickered, split, and merged again like ink in water. I stepped back, almost tripping over a root. The hill behind me seemed farther away, as though I had climbed into another world. Everything smelled older here, older than memory, older than the town itself. I listened. Soft footsteps, or maybe nothing, crept around the edges of my hearing. A pause. A breath that was not mine. The barn door shifted slightly. Not open, not closed. Somewhere in between. A sigh escaped from the crack, soft, deliberate, like it had been waiting for me. I wanted to stay. Part of me was drawn to see it again, to catch a glimpse of that fleeting shape. But the rational part of me, the part that still remembered warmth and safety, urged me down the hill. I turned. The moonlight caught on something wet in the grass, but I didn't pause to look closer. The small humanoid figure was not there. By the time I reached the base of the hill, the town lights glimmered far away. A hum drifted faintly from the houses, distant and untroubled. And behind me, the barn watched, silent, waiting. I can still see the shape in my mind. Not fully formed, not fully gone. Just a shadow, peering, remembering, or perhaps regretting. And sometimes, when I walk past the edge of town, I swear I hear it again. Soft footsteps behind the cracks of windows. And I wonder if it's still waiting, or if I brought it with me. The fog thickens as night deepens. I keep moving, but I can feel the weight of that gaze. And even in the quietest hours when I lie in bed, I remember the small eyes in the dark and the regret that came too late. The morning was soft, pale light spilling over the horizon. Mist lingered among the wheat, each stalk bending under a thin coat of dew. I walked slowly, letting my boots press into the cool earth, feeling the wetness seep around my ankles. The field stretched wider than I remembered. Rows of wheat, neat yesterday, were broken, trampled in ways I could not place. Patterns formed themselves across the soil, circles and lines delicate and precise, as though an unseen hand had traced them in the night. A hum rose, barely noticeable at first. I paused, listening. It wasn't the wind, not the birds. Something low and steady vibrated in my chest. I stepped closer to the center. The wheat parted under my hands, brushing my palms with damp silk. The humming grew, not loud but intimate, pressing into my rib cage. There were no footprints, no tire marks, just the ground pressed into these intricate spirals. I knelt to touch the soil, expecting to find some clue. Nothing, only a faint warmth that made my fingers tingle. The shapes were impossible, symmetrical, yet alive, as if they were breathing beneath the dirt. I blinked, and the lines seemed to pulse, shifting slightly in the pale morning haze. The air smelled different here, metallic, sweet, like rain on hot stone. I swallowed, realizing my throat felt dry. The humming softened, now a whisper against my bones, urging me forward. I moved slowly, circling the center. Each step seemed to echo in a void I could not see. The wheat rose around me like ghosted walls, shivering as if in conversation. I thought I saw movement, a shadow slipping between the stalks just at the edge of vision. Every time I turned, nothing was there. Only the patterns, only the hum. The ground was colder now. I crouched lower, the soil moist against my cheek, feeling the designs beneath my hands. They were deliberate, every curve precise, as though a language older than memory had been pressed into the earth. A shiver ran up my spine. The hum was louder in my ears now, vibrating behind my eyes. I pressed my hands harder into the ground, trying to feel the source. Nothing but the strange living silence between the stalks. I circled again. And then I saw it. A shimmer in the air like heat rising from black asphalt, only colder. It hovered just above the ground, rippling across the designs. I froze, breath caught, and the hum softened into something almost melodic. The wheat bent toward it, not as if blown by wind, but drawn. I reached out, fingers trembling. The air rippled under my skin, a pulse like a heartbeat beneath the soles of my feet. I stepped back. The shimmer vanished. The humming lingered, fading into something barely there, like a whisper I might forget if I blinked. I walked the perimeter again, the spirals twisted, patterns overlapping in ways I could not trace. I wanted to map it, photograph it, understand it, but the moment I looked too long, the shapes seemed to recoil, folding inward under their own perfection. My chest ached with the vibration. I could feel it in my teeth, my ears, my hands pressed to the damp earth. I realized I had been holding my breath for some time. And then the silence, sudden, complete, like the world had pressed pause. I waited. Nothing moved, not even the wind. The shimmer returned briefly, just a flicker this time. I could swear it formed something human, pale and thin, a shadow pressed into light. It looked at me, though I saw no eyes. And then it was gone again, leaving only the circles, perfect and untouched. I stood too long, letting the silence settle into my bones. The pattern seemed softer now, almost welcoming. I felt drawn, not afraid, but aware that some part of me had shifted, touched by something I could not name. I turned away. The mist was rising, swallowing the edges of the field. The hum was gone. The stalks swayed quietly in the morning breeze. But when I glanced back just once, the center of the circles pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat I could feel from far away. And I wondered if it was waiting, if it had always been waiting. The night was quiet. Thick fog clung to the streetlights outside. Inside, my apartment smelled faintly of old books and dust. I had just set down my cup of tea. The radio, forgotten in the corner, hummed softly. Then after midnight, it began to crackle. At first I thought it was just the old wiring. A flicker. A soft, static whisper. But it lingered. It wasn't music. Not words exactly, just tones. Shifting, curling, twisting. I tilted my head. Listened closer. The static grew louder. Shapes formed in my mind. Not solid, not clear, but like a map drawn in trembling lines. I could almost follow the paths. Almost. I reached to turn the dial. The knob was cold under my fingers, but the sound refused to die. It bent around me, curling into corners, filling the small apartment. Shadows stretched along the walls. The lamp flickered. I thought I saw movement behind the curtains. A pale light shivered over the floorboards. Soft footsteps. Or maybe my imagination. Pause. Then another. Closer, or was it the radio shifting again? I sat down. Held my hands in my lap. The hum was now a pulse, a rhythm I couldn't ignore. Static whispered in edges I couldn't catch. A voice, or something like a voice. It twisted inside my skull. I felt it trying to draw me closer. I covered my ears. But the sound didn't obey. It rattled through the walls, through my chest. Shaped into corridors I had never walked. The radio's dial spun on its own. A low groan, almost laughter, quivering under the tone. I stepped back. The furniture seemed taller, leaning in, listening. Outside, the fog pressed against the glass. A shadow lingered at the window, then disappeared. Not a person. Something thinner, sharper. I tried unplugging the radio. Cord in hand, I felt a tug. Not mechanical. I froze. Silence, then soft breathes. Not mine. Not human. I sat down again, shivering. The static softened into whispers, but I understood nothing. Every tone seemed deliberate. A puzzle I didn't want to solve. Shadows danced in rhythm with the crackle. The walls seemed to lean closer, and then the floorboard outside my bedroom squeaked. One long creak. Pause. Another, lighter. I told myself it was the house settling. The wind, something small. But the whispers grew clearer. Darker, a map in sound. I saw hallways I didn't know. Corners I'd never passed. Doors opening. Closing. The radio's hum drew me toward them. I pressed my back against the wall. The hum thickened. Every vibration a pull at my skin. It was leading me somewhere or warning me. The clock blinked 12:47. Static flared, loud enough to sting my ears. Shapes in the hum formed into a face. Not detailed, just watching. A door creaked. Not mine. Soft. Gentle. Then silent. I whispered into the dark. "Who's there?" Nothing, only static. Only the map. I tried to leave the room. Feet heavy, dragging. The air thick, humid, pressing in. The radio spun one last time. A long sigh through the wires. Then, quiet. I sat in the half-light. Shadows trembling on the walls. I thought I heard a soft knock at the apartment door. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just watched the radio. Dark now. Cold as before midnight. Outside, the fog shifted. And in the silence, I could still feel the shapes of the sound. Trailing, waiting, unseen. The road stretched before me, black and endless. Only the pale wash of my headlights cut through the fog. Night had fallen fully, though the moon was hidden behind low clouds. The fields on either side were still, almost too still. A faint rustling, the hush of the grass in the wind, or maybe just my imagination. I pressed my hands harder against the steering wheel, feeling the cold seep through my fingers. I'd been driving for hours. The radio was off. No music, no chatter, only the hum of the tires against asphalt. I thought about the warmth of home, but it felt distant, almost unreal. And then I saw it. At first it was small, pale dots above the tree line, blinking, shifting slowly, but not like stars. They moved with intention. I slowed the car. No engine roared behind me. No wind carried anything. Just the soft, deliberate motion, hovering, circling, watching. I reached for my phone. Nothing. Black. Dead. No signal. No light. Nothing. I swallowed hard. I whispered to myself, though I didn't know why. Just imagination. Just imagination. The lights moved closer. I could see them reflect off the leaves, pale glimmers that shouldn't exist. A shadow stretched across the road ahead. I blinked. Blinked again. But it wasn't gone. The air grew thicker. I could feel it pressing against my chest, my throat tightening. I imagined soft footsteps brushing the asphalt, circling me, though the road remained empty. Every mile I drove, it followed. I tried to shake it off, turned the wheel slightly, and the lights adjusted. Slow, patient, inexorable. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just the black, endless highway. But the sensation of being watched remained. I tried the radio. Nothing. A crackle, static, like whispers buried under layers of air. I leaned closer, straining to hear. The whispers didn't form words. But they pressed against my mind anyway. A rhythm, soft, deliberate, in tune with the slow movement above the trees. The car's tires hummed against the asphalt. The hum felt louder, sharper, like it could shatter glass if I listened too long. I wanted to stop, to step out, but my body was frozen. The lights began to descend, not quickly, but like heavy silk dropping. They hovered just above the tree line now, almost within reach. I could see shapes, faint, wrong, like shadows bending in ways shadows shouldn't, and yet they were there. I reached to unlock the door. My hands trembled. But I didn't move. Every instinct screamed to drive faster. I pressed the accelerator. The lights mirrored my motion, keeping distance, but never letting me escape. A rustling beside the road. Not the wind. Not leaves. Something moving just out of the corner of my eye. I blinked. The moment stretched, and then the silence returned. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. The hum of my tires was the only voice left. Every turn I took, the feeling grew heavier. It pressed into my shoulders, my back, like the night itself was a living thing. I imagined the lights above the trees shifting, tracking me like a predator with infinite patience. I tried to call someone again. Still nothing. Dead. I noticed the trees gnarled in the moonless fog. Branches like hands reaching out, grasping at shadows, at nothing, at me. The fog curled around them, and for a second, I thought I saw figures move among the trunks. I shook my head. Couldn't look directly, but I couldn't stop either. The road demanded my attention, but my mind wanted to flee. The lights began to dim, slowly, deliberately, as if they were considering me. And then, just as slowly, they rose again, higher this time, retreating toward the clouds. The highway stretched on. The fields remained silent still. The sense of being watched lingered. I finally exhaled. The hum of the tires returned to normal, almost comforting. Yet every mile I drove, I felt it, a weight in my chest I couldn't shake. When I reached the curve where the lights had first appeared, the trees were empty. No glow, no movement, nothing. The fog was just fog again. I drove faster, but the emptiness followed. A quiet presence, patient, waiting. I don't know if it was in the trees, in the air, or in my own mind. I parked finally at the edge of town. Lights of houses flickered in the distance, ordinary and warm. Yet the memory of the highway, the slow, deliberate movement, lingered. I turned back once, just once. The road lay empty, but somewhere above the tree line I could swear a pale light lingered, silent, patient, watching. The room was still, though I could hear the faint hum of the heater struggling in the corner. Shadows pooled along the walls, long and hesitant in the pale moonlight slipping through the blinds. I lay beneath the quilt, stiff, sensing the weight of the night pressing against the glass. It wasn't cold, not exactly, but the air felt heavy. A soft flicker caught my eye. At the window, something small, smooth, pale. I blinked once, twice, thinking it a trick of the reflection. But it didn't move. I could feel it there, just beyond the pane. Breathing, slow, measured. Like my own, the moon traced the curve of its head, the shape almost human. Almost. I wanted to call, to speak, but the sound died in my throat. My chest tightened, the curtain shifted. A gentle rustle, too delicate to be wind. I held my breath, pretending I hadn't noticed. It didn't react. It just watched. I tried to imagine it gone. I closed my eyes, counting. 3, 4, 5. When I opened them, it was still there. Closer now, or maybe my mind was shrinking. The glass fogged slightly as if it were breathing through it. Condensation crept in faint trails, blurring the edges of its form. I remember thinking how odd it was, the way the light glinted off its skin. No hair, no features I could name. Just a smooth, pale surface that reflected the moon in tiny, quiet pools. I wanted to tell myself it was a reflection, a shadow, a dream. But the rhythm of its breathing matched mine perfectly, and that small, unbroken cadence made my heart beat uneven. I moved slightly. My blanket rustled. The sound snapped the space between us, and yet it did not move. I wanted to look away. I wanted to close my eyes. But something inside me refused. The faint hum of electricity filled the silence. It was louder than it should have been, buzzing softly through the wires in the walls, and somewhere between those vibrations, I could feel it, watching, waiting. I imagined it reaching a hand to the glass. Just a thought. And my fingers tingled, though I had not moved. The shadows of the room seemed to lean toward the window. The corners of my walls darkened, and the edges of the furniture blurred. A soft scratching sound came from the sill, almost like nails on stone. But there was nothing there. Nothing but the stillness, and the hum, and the slow, shallow breathing. I forced myself to blink, slow, deliberate. When my eyes opened, the silhouette was gone. Only the faint hum of electricity remained. A shadow that wasn't quite shadow lingered in the corner of my vision. I told myself it was gone, that it had never been there. But my chest remembered the rhythm, the soft inhale and exhale that matched mine, and the impossibly smooth reflection of light on skin that was not quite human. I lay very still, listening to the night settle back into itself. The hum became softer, fading like a tide. The curtains stopped their restless twitching. But somewhere, behind the glass I could no longer see, I felt the absence of something that had been there, a presence so faint it left only the lingering question of its shape. I reached for the blanket, pulling it closer around my shoulders. My hand trembled slightly, though the room remained calm. Outside, the world continued. Cars passing in the distance, a dog barking once, but nothing stirred at my window. And yet, when I turned my head toward the empty pane, I could swear I felt the faintest breath across my cheek. Long after the silhouette vanished, long after I convinced myself I had imagined it, the memory remained in that quiet, fragile rhythm, breathing together, then alone. The moonlight shifted again, pale and soft, and the room exhaled its own gentle hum, leaving me to wonder if it had truly left at all. The forest was quiet, almost impossibly so. Late afternoon stretched into a dim haze, and the fog curled around the tree trunks like smoke. I had come alone, boots crunching on damp leaves, each step sinking into the soft earth. At first, it was just the usual whisper of branches and the distant call of a crow. Then it began, a low hum, vibrating through the air. It wasn't mechanical, not like a generator. It pressed against my chest, gentle but insistent, as if the forest itself had started to breathe. I paused. The fog thickened. My arms brushed wet strands of mist, clinging to my sleeves, dampening the warmth I hadn't realized I'd lost. The trees leaned closer. Their trunks seemed to bend, their branches reaching, swaying without wind. A shiver ran down my spine. I told myself it was the chill, the long day hiking, but the hum stayed. I stepped forward. Tiny lights flickered just beyond the reach of my sight. Pale, almost white like fireflies, but not. They didn't move like insects. They hovered, pulsing faintly, then vanished when I blinked. I stopped, hand outstretched. The air felt thick as if I had dipped my fingers into water. Rustling leaves answered me. Not beneath my feet, not far away, but somewhere to my side, alone, yet not alone. I whispered into the fog. No reply. Only the hum, vibrating under my ribs in my ears. Every step I took seemed to echo, though the air held no sound. The trees arched over me, forming tunnels of shadow and fog. I could feel something moving with me, just beyond vision. A faint glow appeared through the mist, shifting. I froze. My heartbeat felt loud, intrusive. The light danced, weaving between trunks. One moment close enough to reach. The next, gone. I followed. Branches clawed at my jacket, my hair. The ground was uneven, roots snaking like veins beneath the soil. The hum rose. A vibration that felt like it came from the soles of my feet, deep into the bones of the forest. I stumbled. And then silence, abrupt, unnatural. No hum, no rustling. I held my breath, waiting for the next sound. The fog swallowed everything. Shapes loomed, vague but pressing, shifting just outside the periphery of sight. A shadow moved across the mist. Not a person, not an animal. Something between, leaning closer, waiting. I tried to speak. Only a whisper escaped. I backed away. A sudden flicker of lights. More of them now, dancing, weaving closer, then retreating as if avoiding my gaze. I felt the forest tighten around me. The hum returned. Lower. Almost mournful, like the vibration of glass about to shatter. I realized then that it wasn't outside me. It was inside, echoing in my chest, my skull, my ribs. Every breath tasted like damp leaves, like metal hidden beneath the earth. I walked, but the path had changed. Roots I hadn't seen rose like barricades. Trees I remembered were gone, replaced by taller, leaner trunks, staring with branches as fingers. The lights flickered again. I reached for them. They vanished. Only the rustle remained. Closer now, surrounding me, whispering in ways I could not understand. I stopped moving. The fog was thick, curling around my legs, my waist, my face. My arms were wet, mist soaking the sleeves of my jacket. I turned slowly, trying to locate the source. A movement in the corner of my vision, a faint silhouette. Still human, yet impossibly elongated. The hum dropped lower, vibrating through the soles of my feet, a heartbeat matching my own. I felt watched, not just observed, but followed, measured, catalogued in silence. I held my arms close, shivering. Soft footsteps echoed behind me. Not loud, just present. Pausing when I paused, resuming when I moved. I didn't dare look. Then the lights, tiny, flickering again, forming no pattern I could discern. I stepped forward, drawn toward something I could not name. They disappeared once more, and the hum faded, leaving only the rustling. I breathed heavily, pressing my palms together. I wanted to call out. The words caught in my throat. The forest seemed to sigh. I moved again, slowly, careful not to run. Every tree looked like it was bending toward me. Every shadow felt alive, but I kept walking, because the path had to lead somewhere, and somewhere I felt it always does. The fog began to thin. The hum softened to almost nothing. I turned my head and caught the faintest glimpse of a light. Steady, warm, familiar. But it was gone before I could step closer. The forest was still again. I walked on, but the sensation of being followed lingered, and I knew it would. Long after I left, like a memory pressed against my bones, humming quietly in the dark, the air was heavy with heat. A late summer afternoon pressed down over the fields. The stalks of wheat bent under a faint breeze that carried dust and dry earth. I walked slowly toward the farmhouse, the wooden boards of the porch creaking beneath my boots. The farmer was already there, sitting in a rocking chair, his hands clasped over his knees. The skin on his face was rough, tanned, lined with years I could only guess at. He didn't look up at first, just rocked quietly. A low hum of wind drifted through the open windows, carrying a scent of sun-baked hay. Finally, he spoke. His voice was soft, trembling almost. "I've seen it," he said, looking past me toward the horizon. A disk, floating over the fields. I shifted closer, trying to catch his gaze. But his eyes were distant. I could hear a faint rustling of wheat beyond the fence, though nothing moved. "It comes every summer," he continued, voice dropping lower. "Right when the sun burns the earth the hardest. Never touching the crops, never hurting a thing. I imagined a silver disk, hovering above the golden waves of wheat." The farmer's hands twitched, betraying a memory too sharp to hold inside. "And there, figures," he whispered. "Small, pale, watching. I tried to picture them, but the mind balks at what it cannot name. Shapes flickering at the edge of vision, always just out of reach. They don't take anything, he said, a shiver running through his shoulders. But they see everything. Every seed, every step. I felt their eyes on me. His voice faltered. The rocking slowed. A soft breeze swept across the porch, lifting stray strands of hair from my forehead. And then, a silence. Thick, almost alive. I asked if he had ever approached them. He shook his head. They vanish if you move too fast. You can't follow what doesn't want to be followed. I leaned against the railing, imagining a pale light hovering above the wheat. Figures stepping softly, weightless, between the stalks. I could feel the hush in my own chest, a hollow stretching outward like shadows at dusk. You feel it too, he said suddenly, as if reading my thoughts. Yes, I whispered. A chill rose along my spine. The heat of the day didn't matter anymore. He took a deep breath. The first time I saw them, I thought I was dreaming. But the wheat remembers, the earth remembers, and so do I. I glanced around the field. Nothing stirred except for a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. A shimmer, like heat waves bending light, then gone. Sometimes, he said, voice barely audible, they linger longer. A figure on the edge of the field, watching the barn. A soft hum, faint, almost like a sigh. I imagined the hum vibrating through the soles of my shoes, through the porch, through the heavy air. The wheat bent toward nothing. I thought I could feel breath across my neck, though no one was there. He fell silent, rocking slowly again. I stayed near, afraid to speak. The sun dipped lower, casting pale orange shadows that twisted like fingers across the ground. Every summer, he murmured, I see it. And every summer I wait for something I cannot name. I didn't ask what he meant. Some things are better left unspoken. The world outside the farmhouse seemed to hum softly, quietly, like it held a secret it wasn't ready to share. We stayed that way, the two of us, watching the horizon. The fields stretched endlessly, golden, trembling in the heat. And for a moment I felt it too, the weight of being observed. A soft shadow brushed the wheat at the very edge of my vision. And then it was gone. The farmer rocked quietly, humming to himself. The air cooled just enough to carry a whisper of nightfall, and I knew the disk would come again. Somewhere over the fields, waiting, the evening was soft, almost hesitant. A pale sun dipped behind the horizon, turning the sky a muted orange. I walked along the narrow path that cut through the outskirts of the old farm. The cornfield rose on either side, tall stalks brushing against each other. The air hung still, heavy with the scent of earth and fading sunlight. My footsteps pressed into the dry soil, each one louder than it should have been. A rustle shifted in the corner of my vision. I froze. But the wind didn't move. The stalks swayed slightly, as if whispering to each other. Tiny shapes flickered between them, pale and quick. I blinked. There was nothing there. I tried to keep walking, slower now, cautious. The rustling followed, soft at first, then sharper, more deliberate. I wanted to tell myself it was small animals, a fox maybe, or a stray bird. But the shapes, they weren't like any animal I had ever seen. They darted low, almost human, too fast to catch. Each time I tried to look, they melted into the shadow of the corn. I stopped completely, holding my breath. The rustling ceased. A silence so dense it pressed against my ears. The feeling settled over me then. Eyes, watching, patient, waiting. I could almost hear their breaths, shallow and still. I stepped backward. The earth beneath my shoes felt softer, almost damp. I couldn't bring myself to look behind me. The air smelled sweeter suddenly, like the corn itself had grown ripe too quickly. A flicker of movement at the edge of the stalks. I thought I saw a pale face, blurred, blinked away. My pulse thudded in my ears. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Each rustle now seemed to surround me, circling closer in the quiet. I whispered my own name, as if it might scare them away. No reply. Just the faint, shivering rustle of the stalks brushing together, a soft step behind me. Not on the path, not on the dirt. Closer to the corn, I spun. Nothing, only shadows stretching long in the fading light. Only the silence, thick and almost heavy enough to touch. I tried to walk again. Faster this time. The stalks seemed to lean in, bending as if to watch me pass. Tiny shapes flickered at the corner of my vision again. I caught one moving fast, almost dancing between the stalks. And then, nothing. The air went still once more. The rustling stopped. But the feeling of being seen stayed, sinking into my chest. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. My pace quickened, then broke into a run, shoes skimming the dry soil. The edge of the field came into view. The open road beyond felt empty, safe. The normal world waiting. But the sensation lingered. Eyes patient and calm, following me even in the open. I reached my porch as the sun disappeared entirely. The house smelled of dust and old wood. I closed the door behind me slowly, pressing my back to it. I told myself it was imagination, that the shapes had been shadows, tricks of the dying light. But the rustling, I could still hear it, faint beneath the memory, as if somewhere between the stalks it never truly ended. Later, I sat by the window, looking out at the darkened field. The moon hung pale over the tips of the corn. Nothing moved. Nothing stirred. And yet, sometimes when the wind is still and the night is too quiet, I swear I see tiny shapes flicker between the stalks, watching, waiting, patient. I don't go near that field anymore, but I can't stop hearing the rustle, even from my bed. And sometimes I catch myself thinking it's not behind the corn at all, it's inside. The fire flickered against the trees. Cold air moved between the trunks, brushing my neck. I could hear the soft rustle of leaves, almost like sighs. My friends laughed somewhere farther back. Their voices carried, then dissolved into the dark. I felt alone, but not entirely. Something crouched at the edge of the firelight. Small, pale, almost impossibly still. It didn't speak, didn't blink. Just watched. I told myself it was a trick of the shadows. Smoke curling upward made shapes in my eyes. But when I blinked, it was still there. Closer now, but the fire didn't reach it. I tried to call my friends. My voice caught. My throat felt thick. "Hey, look over here." Nothing. The figure shifted slightly. A faint movement like water rippling. Its head tilted, too slowly, unnaturally. And I realized it had no mouth. The night deepened. Wind whispered through the pines, carrying smells of damp earth and ash. I wanted to move, but my feet felt heavy. Something about its gaze held me. A shadow stretched behind it, longer than it should have been. Not the fire's or mine. Something darker spreading along the ground like ink. It trembled when I did, mirrored me, but in wrong ways. I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. "Who are you?" The air stayed still. No answer. I forced myself closer. Step by step, careful not to scare it away. But it didn't run. Didn't flinch. The shadow shifted again. And in the pale glow of the dying fire, it seemed to reach toward me. Not with hands, but intent. A silent weight pressing into my chest. I stumbled backward. The figure hunched lower, blending into the black. I could barely see the shape now, only the pale smear against the dark. I thought I heard a breath, though it could have been mine. My friends called from the other side of the camp. Voices now urgent, asking if I was okay. I wanted to answer. But the figure's shadow lingered longer than it should have. I blinked. When my eyes opened, it was gone. No crouch, no pale shape, just the firelight and the shadows stretching oddly across the ground. I rubbed my eyes, but the shadow stayed. Thin, tall, impossible angles. Slipping along the edge of the firelight, waiting. I told myself it was just imagination. The combination of tired eyes, smoke, and a restless night. And yet, I can't explain the feeling that it watched me even now, even from somewhere I can't see. The night thickened. Stars obscured by clouds, pale light spilling over the branches. I felt my own heartbeat echoing too loudly. A rhythm that didn't belong to me alone. Soft footsteps, or a whispering breeze. Something brushed the leaves behind me. I froze. I turned slowly. Nothing. Just shadows stretching, bending, but no shape. Yet the chill, the pressure in my chest, remained. I wanted to run. I wanted to tell myself it wasn't real. But the memory of those pale eyes stayed, unblinking, and I couldn't shake the feeling they had followed me here. The fire shrank to embers. Cold seeped in. I watched, half hoping for a return, half fearing it. The shadow flickered once, then vanished. My friend's laughter faded again. The forest seemed empty, yet somewhere, in the dark, I could feel it, silent, waiting. I lay on the ground, staring upward. The sky blurred between cloud and night. I wondered if it had ever been there at all, or if the shadow had been waiting for me long before I arrived. I closed my eyes, hearing nothing but my own breath, and the faint rustle of something that didn't belong to me, and even now when I recall it, I feel the pressure in my chest, the shadow stretching, always at the edge of sight, always pale. I do not know if it watches only in the dark, or if it has learned to follow me into the light as well. The night pressed close around the lake. Mist curled over the water like a soft sigh, settling in the hollows of reeds and driftwood. I could barely see my own feet in the wet earth. Though the moon tried to reach through the clouds, a pale light hung ahead. It hovered just above the water, not bright enough to burn, but enough to make shadows shiver. It pulsed, gentle. Rhythmic, almost breathing with the night, I stopped. The air tasted like damp stone and something older, older than the trees, older than the fog. The lake was silent, yet the pulse of that light seemed to hum along with my own heartbeat. I took a step closer. The reflection in the water shimmered strangely. It didn't mimic me exactly. A hand moved a fraction of a second too late. My reflection blinked after I did. My lips curled in a whisper, and the water hesitated before echoing it. Something shifted in the reeds. Soft, slow, deliberate. I thought it might be wind, but there was no wind tonight. The light pulsed again, and I felt the pull, magnetic and strange, drawing me closer without asking. I knelt at the edge of the lake, letting my fingers graze the surface. Ripples ran outward, but the reflection didn't follow. It smiled. Not me, not the me I knew. It smiled, pale and slow, like the water had learned to shape itself into something human. I wanted to turn away, to run into the dark forest behind me, but I couldn't. The orb's rhythm had seeped into my chest, filling the spaces between my ribs with quiet insistence. A frog leapt somewhere across the reeds, the splash loud enough to startle. The reflection didn't flinch. It leaned closer, bending in ways my own body could not, testing the surface like a fragile mirror. I whispered a name, my own name, and the water answered too late. It repeated the syllables, just slightly off, like a lazy echo that had forgotten how to be exact. Cold dread bloomed in my stomach. The light pulsed faster. Each pulse pressed against the silence, pressing me to kneel closer still. I felt the edges of the night soften, as though the lake itself had grown thick, swallowing the world beyond its banks. A movement beneath the orb, a shadow, quick and slick, sliding just under the surface. I couldn't tell if it was fish or something that didn't belong to this earth at all. The reflection grinned now, wider, impossibly wide. Its eyes, if they could be called that, blinked slowly, deliberately, and fixed on me. And I froze. I tried to speak. The words wouldn't come, lost somewhere between the fog and the pulse. All I could do was watch as it mimicked a motion I hadn't made yet. A soft splash near my ankle. The water around me shivered, then calmed. The orb's glow reflected off the small waves, and for a moment, it was as if the light breathed through the water, through me, through everything. I thought of stepping back, breaking the rhythm, but something anchored me in place. The lake seemed to hold its breath, and so did I. Even the mist waited, suspended in anticipation, hesitant to move. Another pulse, brighter this time, stronger, as if the orb wanted me to understand something I couldn't name. I leaned forward, mesmerized. The reflection leaned too, closer, until our noses almost touched the water's surface. Then, stillness. The pulse stopped, and silence folded over the lake like thick wool. My chest ached from the absence of rhythm, from the sudden weight of emptiness. The orb hung above me, pale and patient, waiting without sound. I blinked. And in the next moment, it was gone. No ripple, no echo, no shadow. Only the water, flat and dark, pretending nothing had ever been there. I stood slowly, Every step felt heavier than the last, the earth sucking at my feet, keeping me tethered to the edge. The mist swirled. I thought I saw movement in its folds, just at the corner of vision, always vanishing when I tried to focus. I walked back along the shore, careful not to look into the water. But in the silence I could feel it, an almost imperceptible pulse beneath the soles of my feet, as if the lake had learned to keep its own heartbeat, and maybe, just maybe, it was waiting for me to return. The fog thinned toward the forest. I kept walking. Yet the memory of that orb, of the reflection that wasn't mine, lingered in every soft ripple, in every paused breath of night. I could not tell if I had left it behind, or if it had let me go, willingly. And sometimes, when the wind is still, I swear I can hear the pulse, just beneath the surface. The night was heavier than usual. A thin mist rolled over the fields, blurring the shapes of tall, brittle stalks. I could barely see my hands in front of my face. The air was still. Too still. Even the crickets seemed to have forgotten how to chirp. I walked slowly. Each step sank slightly into damp earth, leaving a faint print that seemed swallowed almost immediately. The horizon stretched endlessly, pale and empty, but somehow full. I thought I heard something. A soft, uneven shift beneath the soil. A tremble. So faint it could have been my heartbeat, but I knew it wasn't. The shadows moved first, quietly at the edge of my vision. I blinked and they were gone. A pale light lingered from the moon, but it did nothing to anchor the shapes. I paused. Breath caught in my chest. A rustling, not of leaves, but of something heavier, brushing the stalks around me. I tried to tell myself it was the wind, but there was no wind. Only silence stretching like a tight rope across the fields. The trembling underfoot grew, almost imperceptibly. I felt it in my knees, in the soles of my shoes. Something walked, and it did not belong to this world. I moved again. My shadow fell long and thin, dragging over the soil. But the shadows behind me did not match mine. A shape lingered just beyond the moonlight. Tall, slender, too smooth. It shifted when I blinked, but I could never see its full form at once. I stopped. The silence pressed against my ears. Even my breathing sounded strange, too loud, too foreign. I wanted to speak, to call out, but the sound wouldn't come, caught somewhere in my throat, swallowed by the emptiness. I stepped forward slowly, counting each soft footfall. The earth shivered again, this time beneath my toes, as though something moved with me, unseen. I felt its weight, heavy and patient, tracing the edges of my presence. The fields were endless. I could have walked forever and still seen nothing but stalks and mist. Yet I felt eyes, or something like eyes, everywhere. A faint light flickered, pale and hesitant. It didn't come from the moon nor the stars. It came from between the rows, far ahead, as if the soil itself was breathing. I dared not move faster. Each step closer made the air heavier, thicker, as though time itself was slowing. I was small, alone. Then I saw them. Not figures exactly, but shadows that did not belong. They hovered just above the ground, moving in ways that should have been impossible. I wanted to look away. But my eyes followed, fascinated and terrified, tracing the curves of the shadows that slid through the stalks. No sound came from them, only presence. The trembling underfoot stopped. I waited breathless, thinking it was gone. Then from the corners of the field it began again. But this time, slower, deliberate. I realized I had been holding something in my hands, though I didn't remember picking it up. A small stone, cold and smooth. I let it drop. It hit the earth and... nothing, no sound. Only the soft, heavy pressure of the air around me. I moved. Faster now. Yet the shadows shifted to meet me. Not chasing, not fleeing, just there, mirroring, echoing, always just a step behind. The mist thickened. My limbs felt sluggish, heavy as the earth beneath me. I tripped over a root and fell. The world tilted, gray and pale, and then silence. So complete it hummed. A vibration through the ground, through my bones, through the very air. I lay there, looking up at the indistinct sky. The shapes drifted, dissolving into nothing. The tremble receded, leaving only an ache where it had been. I didn't move for a long time. couldn't. The field stretched out, empty again, as though the night had swallowed everything. I stood eventually, shakily, and walked toward the faint light of the horizon. It seemed further than before. Perhaps it always had been. The silence stayed with me. A weight, a companion. And I knew it would follow always, even when I could no longer see it. The air was thick with fog. Autumn had stripped the trees bare, leaving only skeleton branches clawing at the sky. I was walking the edge of the forest when I saw it. A small child, standing perfectly still, where the trees began to blur into mist. Its head tilted slightly, the way a bird watches something just out of reach. I noticed the eyes first, or rather the absence of them. Hollow black pits staring straight at me like tiny voids. It didn't speak. Nothing moved in its mouth. Only a faint gesture, one hand lifted, trembling, pointing upward. The sky was pale, almost silver behind the clouds. A chill ran down my spine, but curiosity made my feet inch closer. I could hear the leaves underfoot whispering, soft and dry. Closer. The hollow gaze followed. I wanted to ask if it was lost. The words stuck in my throat. Its hand stayed raised, rigid, insistently pointing. I blinked, and the fog thickened, curling like smoke around the trees. For a moment, I felt weightless. The forest held its breath. Something just beyond the edge of vision moved, but I couldn't tell what. Then the child was gone. No rustling leaves, no sound of small feet, only fog curling, retreating like smoke from an extinguished flame. I stumbled forward, reaching into the gray. Cold air filled my lungs, sharp against my chest. Every tree looked the same. Every shadow waited. The handprint lingered in my mind, burned into my eyes, pointing. Up, always up. I walked the forest path, slower now, careful. Branches scraped my arms like fingernails over skin. Somewhere behind me I swore I heard breathing. Not mine. Soft, uneven. A whisper lost in the wind. I paused. Silence pressed against my ears. Then a shadow shifted. Not fully human, not fully tree. I turned, and the fog had swallowed everything again. The child's hollow eyes flashed at the edge, just for a heartbeat. Gone before I could reach it. The forest seemed to stretch wider. Paths I remembered twisted and vanished. A hum rose, barely audible, a vibration through the ground. I knelt on damp leaves trying to feel solid earth. The hum grew faint. I imagined the child's empty gaze. A pressure behind my eyes like something watching from deep inside. I remembered the gesture. Up. My chest tightened. A slow ache that would not leave. A pale light touched the mist. It drifted like a lantern carried by invisible hands. I followed, unthinking, guided by instinct I did not trust. Branches snapped softly under my weight. The air tasted faintly metallic. Each step felt heavier, as if the fog itself resisted my motion. I came to a clearing I didn't recognize. Leaves lay thick and rotting. The hum disappeared, leaving a brittle silence. I called out. Nothing answered. Not the child. Not the forest. Only my voice, soft and swallowed. I thought I saw it again, fleeting. A shadow among the trees, smaller than a grown human, taller than my hope. Eyes hollow, black, unyielding, and then nothing. Fog closed the gap. It vanished like smoke in a draft. I stumbled backward, drawn to the edge where the forest met the open field. The sky was still pale, silver-white, infinite. For a moment I could have sworn the clouds moved on their own, rippling, forming shapes I could not name. A rustle behind me. Soft footsteps or memory? I dared not turn. I remembered the hand, pointing. Up. The chill in my chest spread. My skin prickled with the certainty of being watched from above. The fog began to thin, light spilling weakly through skeletal branches. The child's presence was gone, yet I felt it everywhere. In the whisper of leaves, in the shadow that lingered just behind my eyes, I walked on, heart slow and uneven. Every path seemed familiar, yet nothing looked the same. The hollow eyes were a weight I could not shake. I finally emerged at the edge of the forest, where the field opened to night. The wind carried only emptiness. I stood still, listening. Nothing answered. The sky remained pale and endless, and in the back of my mind, I knew it had only stepped aside, waiting. For the next time I looked up, the air was damp, thick with the smell of wet earth. My boots sank slightly into the dirt road, soft under the pale moonlight. A fog clung low to the ground, curling around my ankles like fingers. I had walked this road 1,000 times. Every rut, every stone, every bend, familiar. But tonight, it felt different. The trees leaned closer, their branches brushing against each other, and the sound made me pause. A rustling. Not from the wind. Something deliberate. I glanced back. The path I had just walked seemed gone. Where the dirt had been solid, now there were jagged twists, like the road had been rewritten behind me. A faint light flickered between the trees. It wasn't a lantern. Not quite. Just a soft glow hovering, too steady for fire, too dim for the moon. I told myself not to go. Instinct screamed louder than my curiosity, but my feet moved quietly, almost of their own will. The further I walked, the stranger it became. Shadows stretched too long. The road curved impossibly, cutting angles I knew weren't there before. The fog thickened, and my breath came in shallow bursts. I could hear the hum of something just out of sight. Like electricity in water, I stopped. The light was closer now, pulsing gently, and I could feel a soft warmth brushing my skin, though the night air was cold. Behind me, the old road was gone. Every familiar marker vanished, swallowed by the twisting paths. I was alone. A shape moved at the edge of my vision. Not quite human, not quite animal. It vanished when I tried to look directly, leaving only the faintest whisper of motion. I kept walking. The dirt beneath my boots seemed to ripple, almost alive. A scent rose with it. Iron and rain, heavy and sticky. The light pulsed again, drawing me, coaxing me, but a small, gnawing part of me refused. Something inside warned me, this wasn't a road. Not anymore. Soft footsteps echoed behind me. Not mine. Light, careful, deliberate. I tried to run. My legs refused to follow. The path bent and twisted, a maze of memory and fear. Then silence, complete. The fog swallowed everything. Even the faint glow disappeared. I leaned against a tree, chest heaving, and realized the wind had stopped too. No rustle of leaves, no whisper through the branches, just a stillness that pressed against my ears. A faint shimmer in the corner of my vision pulled me back. It was the light again, hovering, beckoning. It moved slowly, almost lazily, along a curve I didn't recognize. I didn't want to follow, but I couldn't look away. It whispered to something deep inside me, a memory I couldn't name, a longing I couldn't resist. Branches scraped my face as I went, but the path ahead seemed to widen, like it had been waiting for me all along. I could hear breathing, not mine, shallow, soft, matching the rhythm of my own heart. It was just behind me. I didn't dare turn. The ground beneath my feet felt strange, too smooth, almost polished. I stumbled once, catching myself on a route that wasn't there before. The light floated higher, hovering just above the fog, casting pale shadows across the twisted trees. They reached toward me, thin and stretching, but they didn't touch. I wanted to scream, but my throat was dry. The forest seemed to lean closer, listening for a sound I couldn't make. I realized I hadn't heard a bird in hours. No insects, no rustle of animals, just the faint hum that pulsed beneath the soil. The road behind me remained erased, and ahead, the light lingered, just at the edge of knowing, like it would show me something if I let myself step closer. I stopped. The fog thickened around my knees. The warmth of the light felt familiar, like home, and yet I knew better. A whisper tickled my ear, soft, gentle, a name I had forgotten long ago. I turned almost instinctively. Nothing, only fog, only trees, only silence. The path ahead stretched, impossible and inviting. I couldn't tell if it was the road I knew or a new one entirely, woven from shadows and memory. I took a breath, one step forward, and the light moved again, just out of reach, always ahead. I don't know if the road will return. I don't know if I want it to, but I keep walking, and the fog waits, patient. The soft glow waits, hovering, and the road, or what it has become, keeps twisting, just beyond my sight. The night air smelled faintly of wet asphalt. Street lamps stretched thin circles of pale light over the empty roads. I walked slowly, my footsteps too loud against the quiet. Houses stood close, their windows dim. I noticed neighbors on porches, heads bent together, whispering. I couldn't catch words, only the sense of a shared secret. The sky was low, dark, and unbroken. Then a flicker, tiny points of light, moving against the clouds. I froze. They didn't seem like stars. No one looked at me. Not a single pair of eyes turned my way, though I passed them. A cold prickling crawled up my neck. The street narrowed, and shadows pooled along the fences. A dog barked somewhere far off, then silence swallowed it. I felt the air thicken around me, heavier with each step. The lights in the sky shifted faster now, almost deliberate. I tried to blink them away, but they lingered, tracing slow arcs. My hands trembled slightly, though I wanted to appear calm. Windows along the row of houses reflected the glow. I saw movement. A figure behind the curtains, pale, still staring. I caught my breath and the figure vanished. Every small sound seemed amplified. A loose shutter rattled against the siding. Leaves scraped softly along the sidewalk. Whispers drifted again, low and restless. They seemed to drift closer with every step I took, yet remained distant. I could feel them pressing just beyond the edges of the road. A street light flickered and hummed. For a moment, I thought I saw shapes in the branches above me. They weren't birds, not shadows from leaves. Something else. I stopped at the corner where the old grocery used to be. Its windows were black, though I could see faint reflections moving inside. I couldn't tell if it was me or someone else. The whispers rose slightly, almost urgent, then faded into silence. I pressed on, the familiar path twisting into something unfamiliar. Every house I passed felt like a stranger's home. The lights above me pulsed again. One settled in the distance, brighter than the rest. Watching. I felt it. A presence, unmoving, patient. I thought I recognized a neighbor's figure, crouched in a yard. But it was impossible. They didn't move when I turned my head. The hush of the night seemed to swallow them whole. A subtle vibration ran through the asphalt underfoot. I stopped again, listening. Nothing, and yet everything seemed attuned to a rhythm I couldn't follow. Branches tapped against each other. A faint rustling whispered behind the fence to my left. I told myself it was wind, though my chest tightened. The road curved, leading toward the old bridge over the creek. Even that place where I had played as a child felt alien. Water moved silently beneath, reflecting only darkness. I sensed eyes on me from every direction. Not human eyes, though. Cold, reflective, watching without intent. The lights in the sky pulsed one last time, now almost synchronized. I felt a subtle pull, like the air itself leaned toward them. My shadow stretched and quivered, though no wind disturbed it. A porch light clicked on, briefly illuminating a woman's face. She mouthed words I couldn't hear, then looked away. I felt the weight of her gaze on my back long after I passed. I stopped near the park, where the swing swayed empty in the night. The whispers faded entirely, leaving a hollow quiet. It pressed against my ears, soft and unyielding. The sky went still. No movement, no hum, no glow. Only the distant flicker of a single street lamp shaking lightly. I kept walking. Every street felt the same, yet nothing was familiar anymore. The hush of the town followed me, gentle, relentless, patient. I wondered if anyone else would remember this night, or if, like me, they would carry a quiet suspicion that something unseen had passed through. And perhaps it still lingers, just beyond the corners of vision, waiting. I didn't stop. The road carried me onward, and the night just kept whispering. The road to the barn was slick with early morning fog. Every step through the dew-soaked grass felt heavier than the last. I could hear the distant hum of the wind, tangled with the soft creak of old fences. The barn appeared through the mist like a shadow of itself. Its wood was pale, worn, and trembling under its own weight. I hesitated at the threshold, my breath lingering in the cold air. Inside, the smell hit me first. Dust thick and sharp, mixed with something wet. A low hum filled the space, constant, vibrating through the air. I froze. The sound wasn't outside. It was beneath my feet, inside the floorboards themselves. The first step made the floor shiver, and I felt it run up my legs. Shadows clung to the corners, almost leaning toward me. Something small darted across the floor, too quick to catch. I held my breath, listening. The hum grew warmer, almost alive, wrapping around my chest. I could feel it in my teeth, in the pulse of my temples. The air was thick, like walking through water that moved on its own. Every inhale brought the taste of rust and cold earth. A shadow flickered along the far wall. It paused, then vanished. I stepped further in. Floorboards groaned under me, complaining with every movement. The hum pulsed with the vibration, almost as if it was aware I was there. Light from the doorway stretched into the room, thin and hesitant. Dust motes drifted lazily, caught in the pale streaks. A flutter behind a beam made my heart skip. It was small, too small to be human, but quick and deliberate. I tried to focus on the sound, letting it guide me. It wasn't random. The hum had a rhythm, a pulse that seemed to mirror my own. Each beat made the barn's skeleton vibrate, shifting the air around me. I crouched, moving closer to the center. The darkness felt tactile, heavy enough to press against my skin. Every shadow seemed to watch, waiting for me to make the wrong move. I imagined hundreds of tiny eyes tracing my every motion. Then I saw it, or maybe it saw me. A flicker of movement too quick to follow. Something brushed the floor near my ankle and disappeared into the deeper shadows. I swallowed the rising lump in my throat. The hum was no longer just sound. It became presence. It filled my head, wrapping the walls in a low, vibrating cage. Even the dust seemed to vibrate along with it, swaying in invisible waves. I reached toward a beam for balance. My hand grazed rough wood and felt warm, almost pulsing beneath my fingers. The hum shifted slightly, higher, sharper, then soft again. It was aware, responsive, like I was part of some hidden experiment. Movement flickered again in the periphery. I turned slowly, eyes straining in the dim light. Nothing then, quick, darting across the floorboards, something small, impossibly fast. It vanished behind a stack of crates, leaving only the hum. I took another step forward. The floor vibrated stronger, humming in harmony with my pulse. Air pressed against my skin like water, thick, almost tactile. I could hear my own heartbeat, trying to compete with the barn's low song. The center of the room was empty. Yet the shadows seemed to swirl around themselves, gathering, folding in on the dim light. I felt something brush my arm. Not solid, not wet, just cold, fleeting, leaving the hair on my neck standing. I crouched low, listening. The hum had slowed. It was quieter now, almost gentle, but underneath it, tension, like a held breath. I imagined the tiny movements behind crates, behind beams, all watching, waiting. The barn felt alive in its own quiet way, humming and pulsing, responding to my presence. I couldn't tell if it wanted me there or if it merely tolerated me. Every step away felt heavier than the last. I lingered near the doorway a long time, feeling the vibration fade beneath my feet. Outside, the fog had thickened, swallowing the road behind me. The hum softened to almost nothing, but left a weight on my chest, a pulse in my bones. I didn't look back, but I could feel it there. Watching, breathing, waiting. I walked back into the fog. The barn stood silent now, pale light pressing against its cracked edges. The hum lingered in my ears, faint and deliberate. And somewhere, small and quick, something moved behind the shadows, just out of sight. The air was unusually still. The lake lay flat, like black glass swallowing the moonlight. I pushed the canoe forward, the paddle breaking the surface in soft, slow ripples. Mist hugged the edges of the shore. I could hear nothing beyond my own breath. Even the trees seemed to hold their silence, watching. A faint glow appeared ahead. At first I thought it was a reflection of the moon, but the light didn't move as the moon did. It hovered, slow, wavering, almost delicate. The reflection on the water bent in strange, impossible angles. I stopped paddling. The canoe trembled beneath me. A vibration, subtle at first, grew in rhythm with my own heartbeat. Something shifted at the edge of my vision, a shadow, low and fleeting, brushing the surface. I blinked. It was gone, leaving only the pale light. I whispered my own name, unsure if it would break the stillness or draw it closer. No answer. Only the hum under the hull of the canoe. I wanted to move, to turn back, but the water seemed to hold me in place. The lights drifted nearer. They weren't just above me. They were around me. Dancing, mirroring themselves, reflecting off the dark surface in patterns that didn't make sense. The wind began to stir, just enough to ripple the water, just enough to bring a taste of cold on my tongue. The mist swirled into shapes, pale and tentative, then vanished when I tried to look directly at them. The lake became unsteady, as if it had a pulse of its own. I thought I saw something in the water, a form, or maybe just the reflection of the lights, shifting strangely. It wasn't quite a shadow, not quite solid, but it moved against the natural flow of the ripples. I could feel it then. The presence. Not a person, not an animal, something else, quiet, patient, watching. The paddle felt heavy in my hands. Every motion seemed to echo across the water, yet there was no splash beyond the faintest whisper. Even the moonlight seemed to hesitate, broken by the hovering glow. I tried to steady myself, breathing slow, soft, but the vibrations returned. Subtle under the canoe, almost like footsteps in rhythm with mine. And with them, the faintest sound of a voice or the memory of one, lost somewhere between thought and air. The lights tilted. They didn't drift with the wind. They bent as if drawn by some unseen hand. Reflections fractured across the water, multiplied, stretched, and disappeared. I felt the canoe rock lightly, though there was no current. A brush of movement against my arm. Cold, wet, yet not unpleasant, just wrong. I stared at the water, trying to find a pattern, trying to understand. The lights pulsed, slow, gentle, hypnotic. I realized I could not tell which way was forward, which way was shore. A soft ripple slid beneath the bow. I froze. Something circled always at the edge of perception, too quick, too smooth. The mist thickened, curling over the canoe, over my shoulders. It smelled faintly of earth and something older, something waiting. I thought I heard laughter, soft, echoing off nothing. I wanted to call out. My voice caught somewhere between fear and fascination. The lake swallowed the sound before it left my lips. The glow grew warmer, closer, yet never threatening. I could feel its pull, gentle, insistent. I wanted to reach for it, though I knew I should not. For a long moment, the canoe floated in perfect silence. The vibration stopped. The shadows withdrew. Only the lights remained, hovering, bending, reflecting in impossible angles, and then, slowly, they began to drift apart. Slowly they rose. The lake became still once more. The mist thinned. I paddled without thought, without hope. The lights faded behind me, yet a memory of them lingered in the water, in the mist, in the quiet pulse of the night. I reached the shore. The canoe scraped the pebbles. The fog settled back into the trees, holding the lake in its calm embrace. I stood there, wet hands gripping the paddle, staring at the water, alone. Yet I could still feel the faint, lingering pulse beneath the surface. As if the lake remembered me and I remembered it. The night held its breath, and so did I. The forest was quiet, heavier than usual. A pale mist drifted between the trees, clinging to the undergrowth. I could feel it in my hair, damp and soft, settling over my shoulders. The clearing appeared just ahead. I hadn't expected it. The fog hung low there, almost liquid, curling around the roots like it was alive. At first, I thought I saw movement in the corner of my eye. A shadow too small to belong to anything human. I froze, breath shallow, listening. There were shapes, tiny, thin figures, pale as the mist itself. They didn't move like people. Their limbs were stiff, delicate, too precise. I thought my mind was playing tricks. The way they stood. Perfectly still, perfectly watching. It felt like they had always been there, waiting. One of them shifted, just a fraction, a tilt of the head. And I realized they weren't hiding from me. They were studying me. The air grew colder. The silence thickened, pressing against my ears. I could hear the faintest rustle, like cloth brushing against itself, but there was no wind. I stepped forward. My foot sank slightly into the wet earth. The figures didn't flinch, didn't blink. Closer now, I could see their faces, or what counted as faces. Eyes too large, hollow, glimmering faintly with something unspoken. Mouths barely there, but somehow I felt their attention. I whispered, almost involuntarily, "Who are you?" No reply. just the fog wrapping tighter, like a curtain pulled across the world. The ground beneath me felt different, soft, almost sponge-like. Each step made a muted thump, muffled by the thick air. I tried to reach out, hand trembling. A figure tilted forward, too fast, too deliberate. The motion startled me. My heart stumbled in my chest. Then they were gone. One moment I could count 4. The next, nothing but fog and silence. I blinked. Nothing had changed in the clearing, and yet I could still feel them. Watching from the mist, just beyond the corner of my vision, a soft hum lingered, low and almost pleasant, yet wrong. I couldn't place its source. It seemed to come from the very air, vibrating in my chest. I crouched, trying to listen. The hum paused, then started again, quieter now, almost like a whisper. It wasn't words. Not really. But it carried intention. The fog thickened further. Shapes seemed to flicker in and out, teasing the edges of perception. For a moment I thought I saw one step forward, then vanish completely. My skin crawled. I wanted to run, but my feet felt rooted, heavy with unseen pressure. Every instinct screamed that leaving might break something delicate and fragile. A memory I didn't recognize rose unbidden. Childhood, perhaps, or a dream. Tiny hands reaching out from under a bed, always watching. The sensation was familiar, comforting, terrifying. A rustling sound, soft and deliberate, came from the tree line. I turned slowly. Nothing there. Only the fog and the lingering imprint of presence. I whispered again, voice barely audible. "Are you gone?" The air answered with nothing, but the chill didn't leave. I dared to step forward, into the center of the clearing. Every direction was blank fog, pale and impenetrable. The hum faded, leaving only silence that pressed against my ears. Then I felt it. Tiny steps, maybe, or nothing at all. The notion that I was being followed, observed, measured. Not in malice, just curiosity. The clearing held me, even as I backed toward the edge. Shadows twisted at the corners of sight, elusive. The fog refused to let me see beyond a few paces. I never saw them again, not directly. But every night since, in dreams or quiet moments, I feel those hollow eyes. Watching, patient, waiting. The fog returns, softly, almost tenderly. And I remember the tiny watchers, just beyond understanding. I do not speak of them aloud. I do not follow the sound of footsteps that vanish. I only remember the silence they leave behind, cold, deliberate, and impossible to shake. And sometimes, when the air is still, I feel a presence just behind the curtains of the ordinary, pale figures leaning closer, silent, waiting. The fog came without a sound. No wind, no warning. It simply rolled in, pale and heavy, curling through the streets like smoke. I stepped outside, the morning chill clinging to my skin. Streetlights glimmered through the mist, soft and distorted, as if each bulb had been stretched by some unseen hand. Houses leaned slightly, their edges blurring against the fog. I moved slowly. Footsteps muted, swallowed by damp air. Each step felt louder in my ears than the last, though no one was near. Shapes shifted in the mist. First, I thought it was a bush, a parked car. Then I realized they were too fluid, too deliberate. A figure, or maybe many, hovered just beyond clarity, folding in and out of the fog like pale smoke. I paused, breath visible, trembling in the cold. The shapes didn't move closer, but they didn't recede either. The puddle near the curb caught my reflection, and for a heartbeat I thought it was me. But the eyes, they lingered too long, too empty. The mouth tilted slightly, a fraction too wide. I shook my head. It wasn't possible. The fog made everything wrong. I walked faster. The world around me lost depth. Street corners vanished. Trees faded into gray nothing. Even the familiar outline of my neighbor's porch seemed off, tilted, unreal. A rustling passed near the alley. I turned, heart slow but insistent. No one. Only fog twisting, thick and alive. Yet I could feel it pressing closer, curling around my legs, soft and wet. A lamppost flickered. Its light stretched across the mist in long, pale fingers. For a moment, I swore I saw a shadow step into the glow. It was human-shaped, then not, then gone. I stopped, letting my shoulders sag. The quiet settled, heavy and patient. No birds, no distant engines. Only my pulse, pounding a slow rhythm against the silence. I touched the puddle again. The reflection moved differently this time. It smiled before I did. A laugh, small and distant, hovered just under the fog. I forced myself to look away. The shapes at the edge of town didn't move closer. They didn't leave either. They simply waited, patient, shifting in the mist where I couldn't quite see. The houses appeared farther apart than memory allowed. Porches receded. Windows stared blank and pale. I could hear the hum of electricity in the wires, stretched thin over the fog, vibrating softly against my ears. A soft footstep behind me. I froze. Nothing followed. Yet the impression lingered, a presence leaning over my shoulder, I whispered to myself. Nothing came out. The fog swallowed my words, only the muffled rustle of shapes replying. I moved toward home, though the street seemed unfamiliar. Each step felt like wading through water. The air was thick, every inhale damp and choking. A house light flickered in the distance. It should have been comforting. Instead, it looked wrong. The windows pulsed like blinking eyes. The door ajar, though I had passed by only minutes ago, I stopped at the gate. The puddle beside it caught my reflection again. And this time, it leaned forward slightly as if watching me enter. I wanted to blink, to look away, but I couldn't. The fog shifted again. I could see the shapes more clearly now, shapes bending and folding at the edges of my vision. Not quite human, not quite not. They moved softly, deliberately, circling without sound. The wind never came. The fog never thinned. I stepped inside, door closing with a muffled click. The light from the street barely touched the walls. From the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow move across the room. Not mine. Something longer, thinner, folding in the fog I had carried inside. I sat down slowly, trying to will the tension from my body. But the hum persisted, low and insistent. A soft, curling presence lingering where the walls met the floor. I watched the puddle through the window. Outside, the street remained wrong. Shapes twisted and drifted, waiting for me, waiting for the fog to curl further inside, into everything I thought I knew. I leaned back, eyes half closed. The fog hummed against the glass, and I realized softly that it didn't belong to the streets anymore. It had found me, a pause, a breath I didn't take, and then silence, thick as mist. The air was damp. Night had settled into the forest, heavy and unmoving. My lantern cast a small pool of light, trembling against the fog. Each step on the moss was soft, careful. Leaves whispered beneath my boots. I could almost hear my own breath, shallow and hesitant. The lantern's glow shivered on the trees, branches bent in ways they shouldn't, as though leaning toward me, curious. I paused. The light caught something in the glass. A reflection. At first, I thought it was mine. But the figure didn't move like me. It tilted, just slightly, while I stayed still. I blinked, and it seemed closer. Not by feet, but by intention. Closer in its stillness. I wanted to look away. But curiosity anchored me in place. I lifted the lantern higher, trying to see. The figure, pale, blurred at the edges, stood behind me. Or beside me. Impossible to tell. I turned. The space behind me was empty. Nothing but the fog, settling like slow smoke. When I looked back into the lantern, it had shifted again. A tilt of the head. A pause. Watching. My heart began to whisper in my chest. Small, irregular beats, trying not to wake the forest. Each pulse seemed to echo in the glass. I stepped forward. The light traced my fingers along branches and bark. But in the lantern's reflection, another hand followed. Not mine. A pale outline curling slightly around the frame. Slow, patient, deliberate. I wanted to speak, to demand it move. But my voice caught, stuck somewhere behind my ribs. Only a soft, dry whisper left my throat. The figure tilted closer, still matching nothing I did. Blinking didn't help. It only brought it nearer, as though my own eyes were measuring the distance. I tried covering the lantern, shielding the glass with my hands. Yet it gleamed past my fingers, stubborn, unbroken, almost amused. The fog thickened. Shadows gathered like faint memories at the edge of vision. Every step I took left a trail of hesitation. I thought about running, but the ground felt soft, swallowing the sound of my feet. The trees seemed to lean inward, holding their breath, a rustling. Or maybe the lantern shifting on its own. The reflection flickered violently, more alive than before. I froze, and in that stillness, I noticed the faintest detail, a smile. So slow it could be mistaken for a trick of light, or a shadow caught mid-turn. It was not the expression of someone I knew. I lowered the lantern. The figure lingered, now faint, almost dissolving. But its eyes, they remained. Small points of cold, fixed attention. I blinked again, and the figure vanished. Only the flicker remained, dancing across the glass, a reminder that it had been there. I turned the lantern to check behind me. Nothing. The fog swirled, heavy and unbroken. Every nerve felt hollowed out, as if the air itself had swallowed sound. Even my own heartbeat felt distant, becoming part of the quiet. I moved slowly, reluctant. The forest accepted me with no protest. Only the lantern's light whispered along its edges, tracing the shapes of branches, stones, and shadow. Yet in every reflective surface, wet leaves, a puddle, the sheen of bark, I thought I saw it. A tilt of a head, a pause, a reminder that eyes followed, even when nothing else remained. The night deepened. Silence thickened around me like soft cloth. I could almost hear the lantern breathing with me. And somewhere, far away, a faint movement that did not belong to me. I kept walking, step by careful step, letting the flicker lead me through the fog. The figure did not return, but its reflection lingered, always at the edge of my vision. And I realized, perhaps too late, that some light does not merely illuminate, it remembers. And sometimes, it watches. The lantern trembled in my hand. I trembled with it, and when I dared to look once more, there was only the soft sway of the flame and the quiet, patient pulse of something that had not left. The air was still, almost too still, that late autumn night. Fog curled low over the tree line, carrying the faint scent of damp pine. I stood alone at the edge of the clearing, wrapped in a thin jacket, but the chill clung to my skin anyway. A faint rustle pulled my eyes upward. There, above the dark silhouettes of the trees, something hovered. It was a disk, pale, smooth, unmoving. Against the wind it held its place, as if the breeze itself feared it. I blinked. The shape shifted slightly, not falling, not rising, just waiting. I wanted to speak, but my voice was caught in my throat, a dry whisper swallowed by the cold night. The forest behind me trembled with the low hum of distant insects. The disk moved slowly, impossibly against the wind. It seemed aware, deliberate. I felt its gaze brush over me, though I knew it could not see, not in any way I understood. A flicker of pale light traced along its edge, smooth and liquid, like moonlight caught in water. My hands trembled, though I could not look away. Shadows pooled under the trees, stretching unnaturally toward it. Yet it remained apart, suspended in its own quiet gravity. Time seemed different. Minutes folded over themselves. The fog thickened, curling around my ankles, my thoughts. Each breath I took felt heavy, echoing against the stillness. A bird cried somewhere, sudden and sharp, then silence again. The disk drifted lower, just above the treetops, like a leaf slowing to rest on water. It tilted, ever so slightly, and for a moment I swore it hummed. A vibration through the chest, soft, unsettling, almost welcoming. I stepped forward. My shoes whispered against fallen leaves. The forest had grown impossibly quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause, unsure. The disc shifted again, slow, deliberate, as though it measured me, my breath, my pulse. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but words had lost their meaning. I felt exposed, small, yet not in danger, at least not in the way I expected. Its surface rippled faintly, like heat over asphalt. Colors emerged, subtle, iridescent, then faded into the night. It was alive in some way, or at least aware. I could feel a presence, hovering just at the edge of thought, brushing my mind lightly, gently, like the hush of wind through pine needles. A branch cracked behind me. My heart leapt. The disc did not react, not even a tremor. Yet the stillness pressed heavier, as if the world had grown smaller, and the disc occupied all of it. It descended slowly, almost floating into the clearing where I stood. I froze, could not breathe. The night held its breath with me. A single pulse of pale light lingered on the disc's edge, and for a heartbeat, I felt weightless, unmoored. It hovered, inches above the tallest trees, then paused, as if deciding whether I mattered or if I would matter at all. Then it began to rise, slowly, against the pull of gravity, against the pull of time itself. The fog swirled around it, masking and revealing its form in pulses. Every second stretched endlessly, taut with expectation. I wanted to follow it, step into the light, vanish like the fog it drifted through, but my legs refused. I could only watch as it climbed, higher, dissolving into the ink of the night. The forest exhaled, releasing the tension I hadn't realized it had been holding. The hum faded, leaving only the rustle of leaves and the soft sigh of wind. I shivered, though the chill was gone now. Hours might have passed, or minutes, or years. The tree line looked the same, yet somehow different. I felt a trace of something left behind, lingering, an echo of awareness in the air. I whispered the word, "gone," though it was more a thought than a sound. The disc had vanished, and yet I could still feel it hovering at the edge of perception, patient, unseen. I stepped back into the fog, letting it wrap around me again. The night carried on, calm, indifferent, but I knew the world had shifted just a little. I did not look up again. Something moved behind the curtains of mist, slow, deliberate, and I felt watched. The street was empty. Damp leaves clung to the edges of the pavement, dark against the dim glow of the street lamps. Autumn hung heavy in the air, the kind that smelled faintly of wet earth and smoke. I walked slowly. My coat was too thin, and the chill seeped past the fabric, nudging the skin beneath. The houses loomed quiet, their windows like pale, observing eyes. The first rustle came from above. I froze mid-step. A soft, deliberate stirring in the branches. No wind. The air was still, almost too still. Yet the sound persisted like tiny feet brushing the leaves. I looked up. Shapes moved among the bare branches. Small, fast, paused in the gaps between the wood. Eyes. I thought they might be eyes, or reflections. I couldn't be sure. They waited, patient, quiet, like they had all the time in the world. I tried to convince myself it was squirrels, or perhaps an owl, though it felt wrong. Their gaze pressed down, a weight I could not lift. I stepped faster. The rustling followed. Overhead, the branches shifted, shadows flickering against the pale streetlight. The trees were closer here, their limbs tangled above, creating a web of darkness. Every movement suggested something watching, just beyond the reach of recognition. My heartbeat quickened. I could feel it in my ears, in the hollow of my throat. Every step echoed too loudly on the damp asphalt. A tiny shape dropped from a branch. It hovered just above the ground, unmoving. I could not make out what it was. It did not fall. It did not scurry. It simply waited. I ran then. My shoes slapped the street in uneven rhythm. Branches clawed at my coat, catching my sleeve as if to slow me. They were still above, shifting quietly, sometimes pausing. Their presence was a soft weight, pressing the air around me. The houses blurred past, fences, gates, the hollow spaces between them. I wanted to call out, but my voice dissolved before it left my mouth. A shadow detached itself from the tree line. I blinked. It was gone, yet the feeling remained. Eyes tracing my back, lingering over my shoulders. Every flicker of movement seemed deliberate, aware. I reached the corner where the street bent. A pool of pale light stretched across the asphalt. For a moment, I thought I saw the shapes gather there, waiting, silent. I dared not stop. Each step made the rustling louder, closer. Every crack of a twig was amplified in the quiet night. My breath came shallow. Mist formed with each exhale, curling into itself. The night felt alive, shifting just beyond my vision. The shapes were gone, or perhaps they had merged with the shadows. Either way, the sensation of being watched clung to me. The street opened into a small square. Familiar houses, familiar fences. Yet even here, the silence was wrong, thicker than it should be. I slowed, peering into the trees at the edge of the square. Nothing moved. Only the faintest twitch of a branch, like a finger pointing, just beyond the reach of understanding. I pressed on, steps hesitant now, ears straining for the slightest disturbance. By the time I reached my door, the air felt normal again. Almost. The leaves lay still, damp and ordinary. I stepped inside, closed the door. The streetlight outside flickered once, then steadied. And yet, in the silence, I could still feel them. Above, waiting, patient. I do not know how many shapes there were. I do not know what they wanted. Only that the rustling continues in memory, soft and deliberate whenever the wind is still. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, I swear I hear them again. Above me, watching. It was late autumn, and the air had that brittle edge that made every step sound hollow. Fog curled low over the streets of the small town, wrapping the houses in a pale, damp shroud. I stepped outside, pulled my coat tighter, and noticed the first lights. They hovered above the rooftops, soft at first, like a distant lantern flickering in rhythm with my breath. No sound came from them. Nothing moved except the leaves in the gutters, rustling like soft whispers. Neighbors' windows glowed faintly, faces pale behind the glass. I could feel them staring, or maybe imagining they were staring. I couldn't be sure. The lights shifted suddenly. One blinked here, another flared over there, tracing lines across the empty sky. I tried to count them, but they were too many, too random, too deliberate. A tight weight settled in my chest. Air felt thicker. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. A dog barked somewhere. It sounded distant, echoing as if through a tunnel. I couldn't tell if the sound was real or just a tremor in my own ears. People had started to gather on the streets, whispering. Voices soft, taut with the same quiet dread I felt pressing on my shoulders. We didn't speak. No one could. The lights bent closer to the rooftops. A low hum began, almost imperceptible. It made my teeth feel brittle. I pressed my hands to my ears. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide in a house with locked doors, away from the hovering shapes. But my legs refused. The pattern changed. They twisted, moving in angles that made no sense, skipping over the town like the sky itself had fractured. A shadow flickered across the street, too quick to see. I swore I caught the outline of someone or something moving between the lights. But when I blinked, there was nothing. The buzzing in my ears grew, a fine, static tension. It wasn't loud, but it filled every corner of my mind. I could feel it pressing against the inside of my skull, a persistent insistence. Windows of nearby houses went dark, one by one. The people had vanished, or maybe they were never there. Only their whispers lingered, curling in the fog. I turned to follow the nearest light. It drifted over the rooftops like smoke, fragile and untouchable. I stepped forward, and my shadow stretched long, trembling across the pavement. Then it stopped. The lights blinked out at once, leaving the sky bare and empty. The silence was immediate, almost painful. The hum faded into a high-pitched echo, a faint ringing that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. I pressed my palms to the ground, feeling the cold seep through the soles of my shoes. The town smelled of wet leaves and faint metallic electricity. I could still feel the weight above me, though the lights were gone. It lingered in my chest, in the hollow of my throat, in the space behind my eyes. I walked slowly back toward my house. Every step sounded louder than it should, each one absorbed by the fog but magnified in my mind. The streets were empty now. No whispers, no lights, only the soft rustle of the wind through the skeletal trees. I paused at my doorway. The sky was ordinary, quiet, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something remained, suspended just above the rooftops, waiting. Inside, the walls were warm, safe. But when I leaned against the door, I could still hear the faint, distant hum, like a memory that refused to fade. I lit a candle, letting its flicker chase the shadows across the floor. I told myself it was over. The town was asleep. The lights were gone. Yet in the quiet, I knew it wasn't. Somewhere, far above, the emptiness still watched, and I could feel it. Small, patient, alive, waiting for another night. The fog had settled early, curling around the trunks like smoke. The forest floor was damp, soft with last night's rain. I could hear my own breath, shallow, catching between the trees. Shadows stretched long, pale shapes folding over themselves. Every step felt heavier than the last. I kept thinking I saw movement just beyond my vision, but when I blinked, nothing stirred. A faint glimmer appeared ahead. Not bright, just a trembling point of light, pulsing like a heartbeat. It lingered, uncertain, as if it too was afraid. I stopped. The air smelled wet, earthy, and a little burned. I called out, but my voice barely reached past my own ears. The light pulsed again, slow, deliberate, alive. It wasn't a fire, I realized. Not a lantern or torch. Something different. I stepped closer. Branches scraped my arms, soft scratches that whispered through the fog. The glimmer shifted, flickering, reluctant. Each pulse felt like it was measuring me, weighing me, and I felt my chest tighten. I remembered the stories about lights that lead people deeper, or those that vanish when you need them most. I wanted to turn back, but curiosity had a quiet pull I couldn't resist. It pulsed once more, slower this time. I reached my hand toward it, fingers trembling. The forest held its breath with me, and then, just as my fingertips grazed where it should have been, it disappeared. Nothing. Only fog swallowing the space where it had been. The damp air pressed against my skin. The silence was thick, heavier than the fog. I froze, soft rustling around me, but no shape. The hum of life, distant, almost comforting, yet too faint to trust. I took a step, another. The mist seemed to shift around me, curling, tightening, watching. Every sound I made bounced back strangely. A branch snapped, a soft footstep behind me. I turned slowly, but only more fog stared back. I wondered if I'd imagined the light, if I had been chasing the memory of something I wanted so badly to see. But the imprint of it lingered, warm, pulsing in my chest. Like a heartbeat left behind, time slipped. Or maybe I did. Minutes, hours? Impossible to tell. The forest was still, unmoving yet attentive. I walked, then stopped again. The fog thickened, curling into shapes that almost resembled faces. But when I looked closer, they dissolved into nothing. I heard a soft hum, low, vibrating beneath my skin. I turned in every direction, but the fog held tight around me, and the light was gone. I kept moving. Every step echoed in the hollow space between the trees. The forest seemed to bend with me, shadows stretching and shrinking in the corners of my eyes. Then a faint glow, not bright, not steady, just a flicker, distant, uncertain. I hesitated. It felt like a memory of the light, or a promise that it could still exist, somewhere beyond the fog. I followed, step by step, breath catching, heart loud. The trees parted slightly, revealing nothing but deeper mist. The light had vanished again, a heartbeat lost in the silence. I stopped completely. The fog pressed against my face. I could smell the wet moss, the decay, the faint trace of smoke. The forest had gone quiet again, no glimmer, no pulse. Only the emptiness that had always been there. I sat on a fallen log, letting the damp seep through my clothes. The hum of my own blood, my own heartbeat, filled the space. I closed my eyes. The forest exhaled around me. And in that exhale, I thought I felt it again. A tiny flicker deep behind my eyelids. A whisper of light that might have been real or might have been what I needed to keep walking. I didn't move. I just listened. To the fog shifting, to the shadows folding, to the silence that had finally learned my name. And then, nothing. Only the weight of waiting, and the faintest glimmer lingering behind my closed eyes, like the memory of a heartbeat that might never return.